At the center of one of the most fortified diplomatic compounds on Earth, alarms suddenly erupted across Baghdad's heavily guarded green zone. Moments later, explosions shook the perimeter of the United States Embassy Baghdad. The attack was not random. It was a calculated signal, and according to regional analysts, it may represent the first visible escalation of what some are now calling Operation Epic Fury. If this confrontation continues to expand, it won't just threaten diplomats or military personnel. It could destabilize the entire balance of power across the Middle East. To understand the significance of this strike, you have to understand the location. The United States Embassy Baghdad is not just a diplomatic office. It is the largest American embassy complex in the world, a heavily fortified facility located inside Baghdad's green zone. The compound represents the physical symbol of U.S. influence in Iraq. Any attack on this location carries strategic meaning far beyond the immediate damage, because Baghdad sits at a geopolitical crossroads. To the east lies Iran, a regional power with vast missile capabilities and a complex network of allied militias. To the west and south are key global energy corridors that help move millions of barrels of oil each day. And hovering above all of this is the fragile balance of power between Washington and Tehran, a rivalry that has shaped Middle Eastern politics for decades. So when explosions occur at the gates of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, the message is rarely accidental. It is strategic. Late in the evening, radar systems monitoring the skies above Baghdad detected multiple incoming projectiles. Within seconds, air defense sirens activated across the green zone. Security personnel inside the United States Embassy Baghdad moved into emergency response protocols. According to regional reports, several rockets or short-range missiles were launched toward the compound. One projectile reportedly impacted near the embassy perimeter. Others landed within the wider green zone, an area that houses foreign embassies, Iraqi government buildings, and coalition military facilities. The attack occurred amid rising tensions linked to what observers have begun referring to as Operation Epic Fury, a broader cycle of retaliation between American forces and Iran-aligned groups operating in Iraq. Within minutes of the explosions, surveillance drones and counter-rocket systems began scanning the surrounding districts of Baghdad. Convoys moved quickly through the fortified zone. Military helicopters appeared overhead. From a tactical perspective, the attack itself was relatively limited, but its symbolism was enormous. Because striking a diplomatic compound, especially one as heavily protected as this, sends a deliberate geopolitical signal, and that signal was directed straight at Washington. Here's where things get interesting. Attacks like this are rarely designed purely to cause physical destruction. Their real purpose is strategic communication. For groups aligned with Iran, targeting American facilities in Iraq serves multiple objectives. First, it demonstrates the ability to threaten U.S. assets across the region. Second, it reinforces the perception that American forces remain vulnerable even inside heavily fortified zones. And third, it signals political resistance against Washington's military presence in Iraq. But this is where the strategy becomes clear. Direct confrontation between Iran and the United States carries enormous risks. So instead of open warfare, both sides often operate through layers of indirect pressure, proxy forces, limited strikes, strategic signaling. Each action is calibrated carefully, enough to demonstrate strength, but ideally not enough to trigger a full-scale war. In military strategy, this is often described as controlled escalation, and Baghdad has repeatedly become the stage where this strategic messaging plays out. But behind the explosions and political messaging lies a deeper economic reality. Military confrontations are not just about weapons, they are also about cost. Launching a simple rocket attack can cost only a few $1,000s, but defending against it is far more expensive. Advanced missile defense systems deployed around U.S. bases can cost millions per interceptor. That creates an asymmetric equation. A relatively cheap projectile can force a massively expensive defensive response. Now the math becomes uncomfortable. The United States spends more than $800 billion annually on defense, making it the largest military budget in the world. Meanwhile, Iran spends only a fraction of that amount. Yet, through proxy networks and lower-cost weapon systems, Iran can still challenge American influence in multiple regional theaters. This economic imbalance is one of the defining characteristics of modern asymmetric warfare. And the battlefield is not limited to missiles. Energy markets also react quickly to instability. The Persian Gulf remains one of the most critical oil corridors on the planet. Millions of barrels of crude oil pass through nearby shipping routes every single day. Any escalation between Iran-linked forces and the United States can immediately trigger concerns about supply disruptions, which means a single rocket attack in Baghdad can ripple across global financial markets. That's the hidden economic layer of geopolitical conflict. Now the real question is, what happens next? Because this incident does not exist in isolation. The Middle East is already experiencing a complex web of tensions involving regional powers, proxy groups, and global alliances. If attacks on diplomatic compounds continue, the United States could respond with stronger military actions. That might involve targeted strikes on militia infrastructure, or increased troop deployments to protect strategic facilities. On the other hand, escalation risks triggering a wider confrontation, and that could draw multiple countries into the conflict. For global markets, even the perception of instability in the region can influence oil prices and shipping costs. Insurance rates for cargo vessels may rise, trade routes could become more expensive, and investors around the world begin watching every development carefully, because geopolitical risk travels fast. And in a globally connected economy, regional conflicts rarely stay regional for long. The attack near the United States Embassy Baghdad is more than just another security incident. It represents a small but meaningful piece of a much larger geopolitical puzzle. A confrontation shaped by strategy, economics, and power projection. In modern warfare, the battlefield is rarely defined by a single explosion. Instead, it unfolds through layers of signals, responses, and strategic calculations. And as tensions between the United States and Iran continue to evolve, cities like Baghdad remain at the center of that fragile balance. Because in geopolitics, even a limited strike can carry consequences far beyond the place where it lands. If you enjoy deep geopolitical analysis and strategic breakdowns like this, consider subscribing and sharing this video.